The lights come up slowly, not on a battlefield, but on a ledger. Columns of numbers, percentages, budgets. Because before a single tank rolls, before a drone ever lifts into the air, war begins on paper. In Moscow, behind closed doors and polished podiums, the Russian state has done something it has avoided for years. It has put a price tag on its war. For the first time since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine began, the Kremlin has peeled back the curtain just enough to reveal what this conflict truly costs. Not the total defense budget, not vague national security allocations, but the war itself, a standalone figure, a disclosure that speaks volumes, not just about military intent, but about political signaling, economic strain, and strategic endurance. According to Russia's own accounting, the war now consumes more than 5% of the country's entire economic output. In raw terms, that translates into a sum approaching $140 billion. That number alone reframes everything. This is no longer a special military operation sustained at the margins of state spending. This is a war that has burrowed into the core of the Russian economy, reshaping priorities, distorting growth, and binding the country's future to the outcome of a single, grinding conflict. To understand the gravity of this moment, we have to step back. Russia's nominal gross domestic product sits in the range of $2.5 to nearly $3 trillion, depending on whose projections you trust. Whether the final war bill lands closer to $128 billion or pushes past $137 billion, the conclusion is the same. Moscow is now spending on Ukraine at a level comparable to the entire annual defense budgets of major global powers. And it is doing so year after year with no clear end in sight. This disclosure is not accidental. It arrives at a moment when Russia is simultaneously projecting confidence and demanding concessions. At the negotiating table, Moscow signals that it can fight indefinitely. On the home front, it tells its population that this sacrifice is manageable, calculated, and under control. But numbers have a way of cutting through rhetoric. 5% of GDP is not background noise. It is the sound of an economy reorganized around war, and that reorganization is visible on the front lines, where Russia's military has adapted in ways both crude and unsettling. One of the most striking shifts is not toward heavier armor or advanced platforms, but toward speed, improvisation, and expendability. Tens of thousands of motorcycles, quad bikes, and lightweight all-terrain vehicles have been pushed into service, not as logistics support. As assault platforms, these vehicles are cheap, fast, and exposed. They offer no armor, no protection from shrapnel or small arms fire. But they do something else. They move quickly enough to complicate drone targeting. In a battlefield saturated with eyes in the sky, speed becomes a form of camouflage. Russian units now surge toward Ukrainian positions in swarms of small vehicles, betting that velocity and numbers can offset vulnerability. It is a tactic born of necessity, not elegance. It reflects a battlefield where traditional armored assaults have become prohibitively costly, where tanks are hunted, and where every static position is a potential death sentence. The motorcycle charge is not a sign of technological superiority. It is a sign of adaptation under pressure, of a military willing to trade protection for momentum. That same calculus applies to manpower. Russia continues to feed the front with staggering numbers of new contract soldiers. More than 400,000 in a single year, fewer than the year before, but still an immense flow of human capital into the war machine. These are not mass mobilization conscripts dragged unwillingly from their homes. They are contract recruits, lured by money, legal forgiveness, and the promise of social mobility in a country where opportunity has narrowed. The demographic profile matters. Many are under 40. A significant portion possess higher or technical education. This is not just a pool of expendable labor. It is a slice of Russia's working-age, skilled population being absorbed by the military-industrial complex. Every contract signed fills a trench, but it also leaves a gap in the civilian economy. Factories, universities, and regional industries feel that absence, even as the state insists the system remains balanced. On the battlefield, the character of violence has shifted again, this time upward, into the air. First-person view drones now account for roughly half of the casualties inflicted by Russian forces. Small, agile, relatively inexpensive, these devices have become the defining weapon of the war. They hover, they hunt, they strike with terrifying precision, often piloted from miles away by operators watching through grainy live feeds. The psychological effect is profound. There is no warning roar, no incoming artillery whistle, just a sudden appearance, a mechanical insect carrying explosives, guided directly into a trench, a vehicle, a building. The war has become intimate in a new way. Killing is done eye to eye, mediated through screens. Russia claims it has surged ahead in drone production, then insists the gap has closed as Ukraine responds in kind. This is an arms race measured not in decades, but in weeks. Designs are copied, countermeasures improvised, software updated in real time. The sky above eastern Ukraine is no longer empty space. It is contested terrain, crowded and lethal. Recognizing this, Moscow is preparing a structural shift. Plans are underway to create an entirely new branch of military service dedicated to unmanned systems. Not just units, but a force designed to integrate drone warfare across land, air, and potentially space-adjacent domains. Tens of thousands of personnel are expected to be trained, formalizing what began as an ad hoc adaptation into doctrine. This mirrors developments on the Ukrainian side, where specialized drone units have already been elevated and centralized. What we are witnessing is the institutionalization of a new kind of war. One where algorithms, supply chains, and operator training matter as much as artillery barrels and armored hulls. But the battlefield does not end at the front line. It stretches deep into national territory, where Ukraine has increasingly taken the fight into Russia itself. Thousands of long-range drones have crossed the border, probing defenses, striking energy facilities, testing airspace security. Moscow claims interception rates nearing total effectiveness, but the volume alone tells a story of escalation. Early in the year, these incursions numbered in the hundreds each month. By late spring, they surged into the thousands. This is pressure, applied not to seize territory, but to disrupt, to signal vulnerability, and to force Russia to divert resources inward. Air defense systems that might protect frontline units are instead tied down guarding refineries, power stations, and industrial hubs. In response, Russia is experimenting again, this time with drones designed to hunt drones. High-speed interceptors, agile enough to chase and destroy incoming threats. It is a technological duel unfolding largely out of public view, but with enormous implications. Whoever dominates this layer of the conflict gains not just tactical advantage, but strategic breathing room. All of this unfolds under the shadow of nuclear capability. Russia has quietly received new strategic bombers, modernized platforms capable of carrying nuclear or long-range conventional payloads. These aircraft are not about Ukraine in the narrow sense. They are about signaling continuity, resilience, and deterrence. Even as conventional forces are stretched and adapted, the pillars of Russia's strategic posture are being reinforced. Yet even here, the war intrudes. Reports of audacious Ukrainian drone strikes against bomber fleets underscore how no asset is entirely safe. The line between frontline and homeland has blurred, and with it, long-held assumptions about sanctuary. This is the landscape as Russia presents it, a war-funded, staffed, and technologically evolving, a state signaling stamina, a military reshaping itself under fire. But beneath the declarations and statistics lies a deeper question, not how much Russia can spend or how many soldiers it can recruit, but how long this balance can hold. Because war budgets are not just measures of capacity, they are bets. Bets that political will outlast economic strain. Bets that adaptation outpaces attrition. Bets that the story told to the public remains convincing as the costs accumulate. And as we move forward, the focus shifts from inputs to effects. From what Russia is spending and building to what it is targeting, disrupting, and destroying. The next chapter of this investigation takes us directly into the infrastructure of modern life itself. The power grids, supply networks, and civilian systems that have become central battlegrounds in this war. Because in this war, infrastructure is no longer collateral damage. It is the battlefield. Russia's military leadership has been unusually explicit about this. Precision strikes, they say. Measured effectiveness. Quantifiable results. Behind those sterile phrases lies a campaign that has reached deep into Ukraine's civilian backbone, targeting the arteries that carry electricity, heat, and water to millions of people. Thermal power plants, hydroelectric facilities, substations, transformers, the invisible architecture of daily life. By Moscow's own accounting, more than 70% of Ukraine's thermal power capacity has been disabled. Over a third of its hydroelectric generation has been knocked offline. These are not symbolic numbers. They represent entire regions forced into rolling blackouts, emergency rationing, and perpetual uncertainty. They represent hospitals running on generators, families heating homes with improvised stoves, and cities learning to function in cycles of light and darkness. The strikes are not random, they are timed, often coordinated with seasonal vulnerability, winter cold, summer heat, moments when energy demand peaks and resilience is lowest. This is strategy aimed not at immediate territorial gain, but at endurance, at morale. At the question that haunts every prolonged conflict: how much can a society absorb before it fractures? Russia claims an effectiveness rate approaching 60% for these precision attacks. Whether that figure withstands independent scrutiny is almost beside the point. What matters is the intent. This is an admission that civilian systems are now central objectives, and international observers have taken note. Human rights monitors have documented how these attacks disproportionately affect the most vulnerable: the elderly, the sick, those unable to flee or adapt. War, here, is not just fought against an army. It is waged against time, temperature, and exhaustion. Yet Ukraine is not passive in this equation. Even as it absorbs blows to its grid, it has expanded its own campaign of long-range strikes inside Russian territory. Energy infrastructure has become a two-way mirror. Oil depots, gas facilities, and refineries far from the front lines have found themselves suddenly within reach. Fixed-wing drones fly hundreds of miles, navigating defenses, sometimes striking, sometimes forcing shutdowns through sheer threat. This exchange has reshaped the strategic map. No longer is the war confined to trenches and border regions. It now plays out across national depth. Russia's claim of intercepting nearly all incoming drones speaks to the scale of the effort required to defend its airspace. Air defense systems, radar networks, electronic warfare units, all stretched thin, all competing for priority. And that competition reveals something crucial. Every system assigned to protect Moscow or a refinery in the Urals is a system not protecting troops near the front. This is the hidden cost of deep strikes, not just damage inflicted, but resources diverted. In response, Russia has accelerated innovation. Drone interception has become its own sub-war, with experiments in high-speed FPV interceptors designed to chase and destroy incoming threats. This is not science fiction. It is adaptation in real time, driven by necessity. Ukraine, for its part, has been refining similar technologies, leading to a feedback loop where each side's innovation becomes the other's problem within weeks. Above all of this looms the restructuring of Russia's military itself. The war has forced institutional change. New formations have been announced, brigades reorganized into divisions, aerospace and air defense units elevated, consolidated, redefined. These are not cosmetic adjustments. They are attempts to align command structures with the realities of modern multi-domain warfare. One of the most striking elements of this restructuring is the emphasis on air and space-adjacent defense. Systems like the S-500, touted as capable of intercepting targets at extreme altitudes, signal a preoccupation with future conflict layers. Hypersonic threats, space-based assets, the blurring boundary between atmospheric and orbital domains. Even as Russia fights a grinding, attritional land war, it is preparing, at least rhetorically, for the next one. This duality defines the Russian approach. On one hand, mass, numbers, budget. On the other, prestige systems and strategic signaling. The delivery of modernized strategic bombers fits squarely into this pattern. These aircraft are not decisive in Ukraine. They do not change trench lines or clear minefields, but they serve a different purpose: reassurance to domestic audiences, deterrence to adversaries, and continuity of the nuclear triad. And yet, even these symbols are no longer untouchable. Reports of drone attacks reaching bomber bases have sent ripples through defense circles. The idea that assets once considered deep rear sanctuaries could be threatened by relatively inexpensive systems has profound implications. It suggests a future where no platform is beyond reach, where cost asymmetry favors the attacker, and where defense becomes an exercise in constant vigilance. Meanwhile, logistics, the unglamorous backbone of any war, has undergone its own transformation. Russia has dramatically expanded the use of drones and all-terrain vehicles to move supplies to the front. What began as experimental, one-off missions has scaled into a system capable of delivering tens of thousands of tons of cargo, ammunition, food, medical supplies, equipment, ferried through contested spaces where traditional convoys would be too vulnerable. This is adaptation under fire. It reflects lessons learned the hard way, after columns were ambushed and supply lines severed. The ambition to double this capacity within a year underscores how central logistics have become to sustaining the fight. Wars are not won by battles alone. They are won by supply chains that hold when everything else is under attack. But logistics, like energy, ties back to the civilian economy. Every drone produced for cargo delivery competes with drones needed for combat. Every factory repurposed for military output reshapes labor markets and industrial priorities.